to another edition of Gardening with Wasatch Community Gardens. We're here today to talk about planting tomatoes. We have finally gotten to the point in the season that it's a good time to think about planting your tomatoes. I know a lot of you have already put them in the ground, but you may be seeing signs of stress in your plants. If your plants are looking really yellow and sort of angry at having spent some time outside in these cold nights, you could consider actually replacing them at this point. If you have not yet put your tomatoes in the ground, hopefully you've thought about potting them up as we described in our last tomato video. And you can see we potted this tomato up on May 12th, and you can see these beautiful roots that are starting to form in the fertilized potting mix that we put in this larger pot. And you can compare that to this sad little guy, which is the exact same variety of the exact same crop. These are both San Marzano tomatoes, but this little guy was fertilized and potted up and this little guy wasn't. He's just been sitting there in his little 2-inch pot, really annoyed. You can see he's really quite root bound, and he's also really quite nutrient deficient. You can tell that by the color difference in the leaves. So he hasn't been fertilized, so he's hungry and he's root bound. And this is just not a happy start. However, if this is what you're faced with, all is not lost. You can simply take some little snips or a knife or scissors or whatever you have and snip off these lower branches. I know that looks really extreme. And you can go ahead and loosen this root ball. Just help it out a little bit so that the roots don't just continue to grow in a circle. Some people like to take a sharp knife and actually cut down. This also seems extreme, but in the long run, it's really beneficial to the plant. And you can cut down through the roots, or you can just sort of pull them apart. You can use a little bit of water to help that process, washing out a little bit of the potting mix and loosening those roots. And then you can bury the plant more deeply. So I think we've talked about this a little bit, for sure in our webinars, about planting the plant more deeply so that additional roots will form along the stem here. However, the soil temperature down at the bottom of the hole is not as warm as the soil closer to the surface that's been warmed by the sun. So there's a technique that we like to use called trench planting, where you don't need to make as deep a hole, and you lay the plant sort of on its side in the hole with the root ball closer to the surface where that soil is a little bit warmer. And then you can just backfill and bury that loosened root ball. You just push the soil in until it's buried right up to those leaves that you've left on the plant. And of course, this soil in the bed has all been fertilized and amended with compost. And he's looking a little bit sideways right now, but within a day or two, the plant will start growing vertically. You don't want to yank the plant in an upward fashion because you may break that main stem, which you don't want to do. But you can lay him in at an angle and eventually put a stake in place that he will grow up against, like this. One thing, if you are trench planting, to realize is this is not where you want to drive your stake, because you will literally be driving the stake right through the heart of the root ball. That won't be appreciated by the plant. So make sure you remember which side you put your root ball on when you're placing your stake. A quick word about spacing your tomato plants appropriately. It really depends on the variety and their growth habits. So some plants are going to be more compact than others. I mean, some of your indeterminate varieties can get, 7+ feet tall and very, very wide. It depends on how you're going to train them. So are you going to cage them? Are you going to trellis them like string trellising from above? How aggressively are you going to prune your plants? So are you going to prune them to 2 or 3 main stems, or really not do much pruning at all? In which case your plant will be much bushier and you'll want farther spacing. The idea with spacing is you want you want to minimize competition for resources. So competition for the sun, competition for soil moisture and soil nutrition. And you also want really good airflow, adequate airflow in between the plants. Your plants need to photosynthesize. So if they're too close together and all of their leaves are competing with each other and shading each other out, they're not going to do as well for you, produce as much fruit, produce as flavorful fruit, as if they were spaced more widely apart. So we've done about 28-inch spacing down this row. So not quite 3 feet, just about 28 inches between our plants. And these will be caged and pruned to maybe 3 or 4 main stems. So we will be pruning out a lot of the suckers during the season. And this is, I think, a really nice spacing. We have 9 plants in a 23-foot bed. So maybe that will give you some sense of how many you can put in your own space. So we are getting ready to plant. We're planting all of our tomatoes today because we have checked the 7 to 10 day forecast, and just about every night is going to be 55 degrees or over, which is perfect for tomatoes. However, if you in your area see a forecasted nighttime low of under 55 degrees, then you want to be careful and very thoughtful about whether or not to put your stakes in place or your cages in place. Because imagine if this stake is in the ground and these are all down the row, it makes it a lot harder to cover your plants, to give them that protection at night. For example, if you want to add a wall of water and your stake is already in place, then you're lifting it up and over the stake, or trying to put it on empty and then filling it around the stake. So it just is a little bit cumbersome. Or if you're trying to drape frost fabric, how do you do that with stakes in the way? So for us, we're not putting in our stake quite yet. I'll fill in that hole where the stake was. I'll water in the plant so that, and of course we pre-wet the hole. So down deeper, the soil is nice and moist. We're not going to put the stake in, and we may choose to just use one of these hot caps and tuck him in for the night. You can fill some soil around the edge of your hot cap like this to keep it in place. Or you can get those little anchor pins if you have some of those. Or you can use, wood or sticks or whatever items you have available to keep the hot cap in place instead of having it blow away. Or you can use a short stake. I don't know if I have a short stake around here, but say this is a stake, and you can actually cover it with anything you have. So you could cover your stake with like a cup, or my favorite is like empty soda cans. And then that gives you a nice soft, broad surface to drape your frost fabric over. And then again, you can pin it down on the ends or use rocks or logs or something to hold down your frost fabric. And then in the morning, you remove your frost fabric or you remove your hot cap, and you can put your soda can away and let your plant have that nice full sun, and it will start to grow vertically. So that's the basics of trench planting and a little review of what to do if your plants are root bound because you had to wait to plant. I hope this has been helpful. We'll see you again in a future episode. Thanks.